The time of Mortal Kombat 1 is upon us, or maybe we're well past it since YouTube likes to share my speculation videos months or even years after the game is released. But regardless, with most new fighting games, I like to look at the history of the series to find characters that deserve another chance to make the roster. However, with Mortal Kombat 1 going all over the series timeline, including the normally ignored 3D era, I feel that no previously playable character is impossible now, even if they're not likely for the main roster. With cameos, which are the assist characters that fight alongside your main character, overlooked fighters have a chance better than ever to make the roster one way or another. So I want to go one step further with the series history. I want to look at some characters that exist in the lore that don't get spoken about, usually for good reason. These characters were in media outside the game's main roster, whether they were in the background, comics, movies, or even just rumors. Remember, Mortal Kombat loves to take characters that exist from word of mouth and make them real. Do they have a chance? Probably not, but this is a good excuse to look at weird characters the series created that we forgot about or never really cared to bring back. So let's unlock the top 10 obscure characters that should be in Mortal Kombat 1. Number 10, Grum. Mortal Kombat tends to give us at least one Shokan character per roster, being the species of giant four-armed, half-dragon, half-human, and sometimes half-feline creatures who mostly use brute force with their extra arms with a side of weapons. Our options are generally Goro and Shiva since they're the most popular, with Goro being the original sub-boss of the series, and Shiva being the first playable Shokan. There's also Kintaro, who's always on the cusp of being included, but never makes a roster unless it's a game that includes every character ever in the series at the point of that game's release. I'm not sure if it's that he's not as prominent in the lore as the other two, or if he's just not as popular, but they tend to shy away from putting him in over the other two. Still, I've always found him to be the hardest sub-boss in the series. In reality, it seems like it's always going to be between these three Shokan for the roster, since there's enough time between games where at least one of the Shokan hasn't been in a game for a good while, with Goro getting a cameo spot on the base roster of Mortal Kombat 1. However, if we lived in a world that expanded the Shokans on the roster, the lore has a few notable named Shokan, mostly related to Goro. There's his brother Durak, who we saw in those bad CGI fights from that direct-to-video animated movie from the 90s, along with his father King Gorbak, who is also in that movie but has also been seen in the comics and mobile games over the years. The concept of an elder Shokan seems really cool. I don't know what techniques he'd have over the younger ones, or if he would just use something like magic, but making the king playable seems like a viable option, or at least give Goro a costume swap that makes him look like him. However, in the history of Shokan, one design caught my eye, and his name is Grum. He was in the Mortal Kombat Malibu comics from the 90s, where Sub-Zero fought him. He was just there to act as a big enemy to take down, so he didn't have much character significance to him, but this design goes hard enough where I want to see it in motion. He's a more giant Shokan that has 6 arms and wields nunchaku. I love that their idea of making a more foreboding Shokan was just to add 2 arms and give him weapons that work best when he's swinging all those arms. I also like that his name is Grum, like the character from Tim and Eric, or if you say Graham with a British accent, Grum. Really, any extra Shokan are welcome on a roster for me, so they can give us a new guy like Grum or just some more of the usual Shokan suspects. Number 9, Kotal Ketz. Kotal Khan was one of my favorite additions to the modern Mortal Kombat games. He definitely could have had a better showing in his story mode fights, being the guy who ultimately gets beat up a lot, since in X he was antagonistic neutral, while in 11 he had his chapter early on, so his role was basically a side character for most of the game. Kotal has a chance to eventually come back as DLC, but since we're looking at other parts of the lore, how about his father Kotal Ketz? With the universe altered after Liu Kang rewrote it, maybe Kotal Ketz holds more power now with his realm not being invaded by Shao Kahn initially. I think this would be a unique way to get more Aztec warriors in the game to expand on that newer part of the lore. Ketz was in the Mortal Kombat X comics where we see he had a pretty good relationship with his son, but it gets strained after Shao Kahn conquers their realm. Ketz let the realm get absorbed into Outworld to protect their sacred gem, which lets them travel between realms realms, so it would have spelled disaster if Shao Kahn got it. Kets tries to pass on his leadership role to Kotal, and later entered an advisory role as a strong warrior of Outworld after his son took over as the Khan. The only discernible difference between Kotal Kets and Kotal Khan when fighting is Kets uses Shao Kahn's hammer as a weapon, which wouldn't really make sense if it was his weapon in Mortal Kombat 1, so I'd just say let's make him a new weapon, or give him the portal gem as his main tool in battle. Even though the gem is just used for transportation in the comic, they could retcon it to give it some sort of other cool powers. Maybe it could form weapons in a Green Lantern sort of way, or power up Kets' sun powers. And since it can form portals, he could have some Quan Chi inspired moves that use them for teleportation. The possibilities are endless when you have a magic gem. You could just keep making up stuff. As for his other powers, they'd be like Kotal Khan, so sun, blood, and command grabs. As mentioned, we could just get Kotal Khan again, but they could use Kets if they want to change it up a bit.
Kotal Khan wins.
Number 8. Zebron. It's one of my videos, so of course we're going to look at some of the dumber concepts in Mortal Kombat's history, but this one has always intrigued me. At some point during Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance's development, before it even had its name, on series co-creator Ed Boon's website, he had a concept for a character called Zebron, who I can only describe as a zebra man with a magician's outfit and a magic wand. I'll put Zatanna footage from Injustice in the background while I talk, since I would assume Zebron would fight like a stage magician looking at his getup, just magic tricks out of his sleeve, teleporting, and throwing unspecified energy with his magic wand. However, the legitimacy of how close he was to making the roster is unknown. It was first said to be a joke that was never really planned, but when his concept art was included in the crypt in Deadly Alliance, they had an ambiguous line saying there was no way they would include a zebra guy in the game, right? Obviously, they're pulling our leg with that line to make us think that there's a chance, but remember when a purple ninja named Rain was included in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3's Attract mode as a joke? A year later, he became a real character and is now a big part of the lore, so Zebron being considered a joke at the time didn't mean he was out of the running. However, at this point, it's been so long that it would not make sense to include him as a fan favorite rumor in a game today, but it's a scrap design that I've always liked that I wanted to bring to light in the modern day. Deadly Alliance had a bunch of scrap designs like him, such as this reptilian guy and a kendo guy, but none of them were quite as bizarre as Zebron. His one-line backstory is he was the prince of a race of zebra people who he was trying to free from tyranny, but he's probably not committed to that backstory all these years later, so take that with a grain of salt. I just want to see a guy with a realistic zebra head do magic tricks in the arena.
Magic is easy as 1, 2, 3!
Number 7. Tasia. The Black Dragon are an underground weapons dealer / crime syndicate of the Mortal Kombat universe. They're led by the well-known Kano, but once you go past him, the other members sort of lose relevance. Cabal is the most notable other member, but he's only with the group on and off in the lore. Otherwise, looking at previous rosters, you have Tremor, who gets a pass since he's also a ninja so everybody likes him, Kira, who just combines Kano and Sonya's movesets, Cobra, who's generally unpopular since he's a bootleg Ken Masters, and Jarek, who some fans like due to being in Mortal Kombat 4, but he's really just Kano's moveset with a new name and is mainly remembered for his meme yells.
This is not a brutality, this is a fatality.
However, there are two other big Black Dragon members from the game everyone wants to forget, Mortal Kombat Special Forces. It was a bad spin-off game, but we saw two other Black Dragon leaders, No-Face and Tasia. No-Face uses a flamethrower, and at first I was like, oh, we gotta have him if he uses a flamethrower, but then I remembered Scorpion already uses fire, and Liu Kang, and Sector, so maybe he's not as unique as I was thinking, but Tasia, she's got a bit of potential. She uses speed and twin katanas. It's still not the most unique weapon skill set, but I could see her playing like Scarlet's original moveset, where she uses command runs and has a strong mix-up and setup strategy with her fast strikes and ways to jump all around her opponent. Though at that point, they could just bring back classic Scarlet, but I don't mind keeping her as a blood mage and having Tasia adopt the old assassin moveset. It fits her character, and I've always liked Tasia's design where I want to see her in more things. I think think it's the hair. I like the short cut with it being long in the front over one eye. However, maybe change up her outfit. It's a bit too close to Mileena. Though I really liked Mileena's pants in Mortal Kombat X, so give those to Tasia if Mileena's not using them anymore. Number 6, Scully. Alright, this one is stupid, but I love it. There's a character called Meat. In Mortal Kombat 4, there was an Easter egg that lets your character take the form of the generic model of the muscular system used for skin-ripping fatalities, and the crew nicknamed this appearance Meat, as if it was its own character. When Mortal Kombat Armageddon was being developed around 2006, the crew wanted to have every character who was playable in every mainline Mortal Kombat game on the roster, and since Meat was technically playable in Mortal Kombat 4, they decided to include him, this time with a unique moveset, which was kind of generic in how it played, but it was still themed around playing a bloody skinless guy, so I found it hilarious. Leading up to the Wii version of the game, they released little bio videos with the developers every week with a bit of history and gameplay of the new characters, Meat included. But one intriguing thing said at the end of Meat's video was this.
Most people don't know this, but Meat has a cousin named Scully, which is basically just a skeleton without meat, but he's never made it into the game.
Yes, this is just a throwaway line, but every so often you hear fans validate the existence of Scully because he was mentioned by a developer in a random 2006 video. But you know what? I like silly things, and putting Scully in the game would be funny. He probably could only be a cameo fighter since he's just a bare skeleton without any powers, but that's all I need. You may be thinking, isn't Classic Scorpion already a skeleton? Wouldn't Scully just be a lesser version of him? To which I say, yes, but don't worry, he'll fight very differently. What would he do? Bite you? Maybe throw bones? Perhaps explode like the old Mortal Kombat 3 skeletons during fatalities? I didn't think much about him beyond the novelty, but maybe he could be like the Jason and the Argonaut skeletons where there's a whole horde of them and they come out to charge at the opponent in mass, which means I'm also making him kind of like Spinal from Killer Instinct. In the end, I think Scully would be a good joke character for somewhere on the roster, and he'd be the least messy character since he has no blood or flesh to lose.
Fatality.
Number 5, Asgarth. He's from the 90s Mortal Kombat cartoon Defenders of the Realm, which is a place you probably won't find any relevant characters now, but I still wanted to talk about it. Defenders of the Realm is a cartoon created for a younger audience, shown on the same block on the USA Network that had the Street Fighter cartoon, which I loved for how silly it was. Defenders of the Realm was just as campy as it, but didn't have as many unintentionally funny moments as Street Fighter, so I feel like it wasn't as remembered. The plot lines were still kind of fun, and combined Mortal Kombat characters with general fantasy situations. I don't think it's bad, it's just toned down for a kid's audience. The cartoon did have weird continuity with the live-action movies though, where some characters that died in the movies are replaced with lookalikes to acknowledge that the originals died, like a reptilian guy who is basically just Reptile, or the new Tarkatan leader named Carbrak, which is just an anagram of Baraka. And then there are some characters who died in the movies that are not around at all, like Johnny Cage, Mileena, or Goro. But then some characters who did die in the movies, like Kano or Shiva, are back with no explanation, so it was kind of just based on whoever the writers could fit into 13 episodes. Also, Quan Chi appeared in this cartoon before he appeared in any Mortal Kombat game, so this is technically his origin. But one completely new character created for this series was an eagle-head guy named Asgarth, and honestly, I just like his design enough where he seems like a cool character to implement. His backstory is he was one of King Jirad's advisors, and now he's working with Katana and allies to overthrow Shao Kahn. He only has one fight against some grunts where he kills them with some eagle claw slashes, and then he looks at the camera intensely with swirly eyes. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but it makes him look cool. As mentioned, I just want him because he's an eagle guy with the voice of Man Ray, but his design does give some room for creativity for some hidden bird powers. Hawkgirl's moveset hasn't been used since the first Injustice game, so start there. While I wanted to potentially see this character for Mortal Kombat X, I kind of gave up since then, since this show doesn't ever seem to be referenced in Mortal Kombat media. However, to my surprise, it did get a reference in Mortal Kombat 11. In the cartoon, Nightwolf had a wolf companion named Kiba, and while a wolf would sometimes appear alongside Nightwolf in the games, it never had a name, but with his spirit wolf wolf in Mortal Kombat 11, it was officially named Kiba, with the only point of reference being Kiba from the cartoon, so I like to credit Defenders of the Realm for that. Maybe the wolf was always supposed to have this name, but with that being the only evidence I have, I like to say the game was referencing the cartoon, so the very minor hope for Asgarth is still alive. Number 4, Charon. This one is completely unjustified since he's shown to be a non-fighter, but I've always been behind this design, so why just designate him to being a non-playable character? He appeared in the Mortal Kombat 11 story, where he was a neutral party that guides departed souls to the Netherrealm, and he was the link needed to get Earthrealm's army and allies to the Netherrealm where Kronika and crew were waiting. He sort of just appears out of nowhere, getting name-dropped as someone who could help, and then he gets saved from being killed by D'Vorah. As you can see, there's no way he could fight, and we probably should use our roster spots on more established characters, to which I'd say, you're right. But with the Kameo fighting system, I could see him being a cameo that completely relies on defending the main character. He could muddy up the field with some shipwreckage or a hazard from the ocean, maybe summon some souls of the damned to weaken the opponent briefly or buff his ally, and he could just teleport them. The Kameo system opens up non-fighters to taking an assist role since they're not in the line of fire against the main combatants, so it doesn't really matter if their body can't really take a hit. I think that's clever. He even has a giant cane if he needs an offensive tool. As mentioned, he's definitely not a prime contender, but he could shake up how cameos work. However, he is based on Charon, the Greco-Roman ferryman for the river Styx in the afterlife, so it would make sense if he stays a pacifist. Having him fight would be like having Botan from Yu Yu Hakusho fight, and that would be... actually, I kinda wanna see that. My point on Charon stands. Bring this man and his magnificent beard back in some way.
Brace for impact!
Number 3, Kia and Jataka. Both of them feel like they deserve spots due to their history, but seeing how hard it was to finally get Serena on another roster, I won't overreach too much. However, I would like to see them playable in some form. They were part of a trio of demons under Quan Chi's command in the spin-off game Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero. Regardless of your opinion of the gameplay, the campy cutscenes from that game are fun if you just want a lore dump with some 90s quality video game acting. Serena was the head of the group and gets the most love since she had character development where she wanted to escape the Netherrealm and was in love with the Elder Sub-Zero. She eventually made a playable appearance in Mortal Kombat Tournament Edition, a Game Boy Advance exclusive game. She reappeared on the roster of Mortal Kombat Armageddon since that had every previously playable character, but Kia and Jataka did return as enemies in the story mode, where they were serving Quan Chi once again. But after that, those two never appeared in any other games, and Serena only appeared as a non-playable character until she finally got another chance as a cameo fighter in Mortal Kombat 1, now showing off her true demon form. With their leader just being a cameo fighter, I don't see 2 more spots being used on Kia and Jataka, even if they were just cameos too, but if the game gets enough DLC, I feel like completing the demon trio as cameos would be worthwhile additions to the combat packs. Now that we see Serena has a demon form, both of them could use a demon form when fighting too, but their main headliners are their weapons. Looking at their game of origin, Jataka uses a laser sword that can fire a beam, so I could see her with something like Takeda's Ronin style, and Kia uses a razor boomerang, which would mean that she's robbing Jade a bit, but Jade's moveset shared her boomerang with her pole, so maybe Kia could use it for more than just throwing. I guess the main issue with their weapons is they belong to more notable characters now, but it's a new timeline, so they don't have to limit themselves to what they did in a spin-off game 25 years ago. My original idea for them was to have Serena be the main fighter, and then Kia and Jataka run in with their own moves to help, like the Noob Saibot Shadow guys. But with the cameo system, it makes less sense for main fighters to have assists built into their moveset, since that's the point of cameos, so that idea is basically scrapped. I also used to think that Serena, Kia, and Jataka could all be variations of the same character, like Triborg in Mortal Kombat X, but once again, I'm suggesting a mechanic for a different game, so I just have to leave Kia and Jataka to a hope and a dream. That being said, Kia's got a bit of popularity since she was portrayed by Kerry Hoskins, who played Sonya in Mortal Kombat 3 and 4, so if that similarity is enough to get Kia and Jataka more attention, hey, spread the word.
Sonya wins. Flawless victory.
Fatality.
Number 2, Hornbuckle. This one's a long time coming, but there's nothing really to him, so I can see why they never went further with this character. In Mortal Kombat 2, the background of the pit shows another fight happening in the distance between a standard-looking human and a guy on fire, and calling it a fight is being generous since they never leave their idle poses. The names of these characters at the time were Hornbuckle for the human and Torch for the guy on fire. Torch ended up being named Blaze when he made his first appearance in Deadly Alliance and then his boss appearance in Armageddon, but for Hornbuckle, we never really saw anything beyond this. Hornbuckle got his name when Mortal Kombat 2 would drop random hints on where to find the secret characters Jade and Smoke. Many of the hints make sense in hindsight, but one of Jade's hints was Hornbuckle who? Which ended up being an in-joke on one of the people involved with the game's development, but fans thought it was a complex way to name drop a background character. And if you want to go look for this Easter egg, it's only in the Super Nintendo port of Mortal Kombat 2, making it even more obscure of a reference. Since the monk in green was unnamed, fans attributed this name to him and it stuck. From then on, he was always a rogue pick on fan request lists, solely because he was a guy who existed in the original trilogy despite having no discernible character traits. And this was basically his only appearance. He showed up in the pit's background in Shaolin Monks, and he's had a few other odds and ends appearances over the years, but when Mortal Kombat 2011 had this stage, him and Blaze were replaced with characters from the 3D era duking it out in the background of the pit, which I always found really clever. Frost was one of those characters, meaning that she's appeared in every Mortal Kombat game in some form since NetherRealm took over the series. Anyway, with Hornbuckle having no character traits outside of wearing green and black, there's nothing to really make a character from. He would just be a new character overall that they can attribute any traits to. What could they do? Well, he wears green, so maybe something with plants. Wait, no, they could just bring back Cetrion then. How about Earth in general? No, that's Tremor. Well, I at least think this would be a good excuse to give us another monk from the White Lotus Society, since his design is based on Liu Kang. Outside of Liu Kang and Kung Lao, none of the other monks really have stuck on the roster. Kai rarely gets mentioned, and Kung Jin only appeared in one game as well, but Hornbuckle could still take pages out of their books on what made them different as monks. Kai had upwards fireballs and handstands, while Kung Jin had weaponry, so Hornbuckle could follow them with fire that isn't just a straight shot, maybe like setting traps or being close range only, some unique acrobatics, and for Kung Jin's influence, just find us more weapons for him. Anyone got an axe? He seems like an axe kinda guy.
Liu Kang wins.
This is normally where I'd put my honorable mentions, but instead, I'm going to use this segment for a monologue that one of my co-hosts had, Syzygy Solo, about how confusing it was to name this game Mortal Kombat 1. So here's that, and then we'll do the number 1 entry.
Mortal Kombat 1, not to be confused with Mortal Kombat, the 1992 arcade game, or its SNES, Genesis, or handheld ports, which are all technically different games, or Mortal Kombat, the 2011 version, which is technically Mortal Kombat 9, but also Mortal Kombat 1, or its 2012 port for the PlayStation Vita, which is also a slightly different game, which is also not to be confused with the one Malibu Comics run from 1994 of Mortal Kombat, also called Mortal Kombat, or the Mortal Kombat film from 1995, which is simultaneously also not to be confused with the other Mortal Kombat film, Mortal Kombat from 2021. Hope that clears things up.
For number 1, I went with the fighter that seems to be next in line for characters created in spin-offs. If you're deep in the lore, you might know of him. Number 1, Hydro. Hydro's been a niche fan favorite over the years, mostly because he's a palette swap ninja, which are always crowd pleasers, just like how Ermac was wanted after being a rumored glitch, or Scarlet after being a different rumored glitch, or Tremor after being in a spin-off game. So Hydro definitely fits in terms of design, but where did he come from? Hydro was introduced in the Malibu Mortal Kombat comics from the 90s, the same place Grum was from. These comics expanded the lore, but ultimately did their own thing since characters introduced in them outside Hydro never appeared in other media. The base plotline of the comics loosely followed the tournament and Outworld invasion from the games, but with certain game plotlines being unestablished, you had mischaracterizations, like Jade and Smoke were both enemies in the comics since they were hidden characters in Mortal Kombat 2, and Smoke had a running gag where he would say toasty at the end of sentences. And by the way, I love that that gag, since the only way you can find Smoke in Mortal Kombat 2 is pressing start when the toasty guy appears on one of the stages. Very clever. There was also a plotline where Sonya gets hypnotized into marrying Shao Kahn so he could invade Earthrealm, since Sindel didn't exist in the story yet. But I digress. With Sub-Zero no longer having an ally in Smoke, they made up their own Lin Kuei assassin to join him on his journey, Hydro. Hydro had the power of water manipulation, and had an alternate version of Sub-Zero's powers, where it was super high pressure water that had the capabilities to freeze. He has one fight off to the side, and then Scorpion kills him in another fight to increase the beef between him and Sub-Zero, because Scorpion just wants to kill everyone that Sub-Zero loves as a method of revenge, and that was all for Hydro. After that, you would have expected him to fade away like every other original character from these comics, but for some reason, modern Mortal Kombat has used him a few times in very minor roles. His first notable modern role was in Mortal Kombat Legacy, the web series that had a pretty popular first season when it premiered in 2011. In the Cyrex and Sector episode, when the cyborgs are being tested, the Lin Kuei brings out an older cyborg for them to fight, Hydro, being his first mention since the comics, but one name drop in a non-canon series wouldn't convince me that he's remembered. 2 name drops though, now we're talking. In Mortal Kombat 11, one of the modifiers in the Towers of Time mode is called Hydro, which spawns a tidal wave on screen. And that's it for modern Hydro, but it's enough to show that this forgotten comic book character isn't that forgotten. That being said, while Hydro has the name recognition and the design advantage, I don't know how unique he would be, but maybe we could fix that. Rain is already a water-themed ninja, so Hydro sounds redundant, but with Liu Kang and Scorpion both using fire powers, 2 water elemental masters could still work. They just have to differentiate how they use their water. Rain could have a weather theme, while Hydro could do something like extreme power washing. The fact that his only recent attack is a tidal wave means he could have a mechanic like Rikuo from Darkstalkers, where he floods the field specifically to help his mobility. Another minor issue is Hydra wears the same color blue as Sub-Zero, so that might pose a problem. We don't have any pink or orange ninja yet, so maybe he could wear that color instead. I guess indigo is also a color of the rainbow he could consider. Finally, he still has freezing powers, but between Sub-Zero and Frost, I don't know if he would be able to keep those moves for the sake of variety. However, if they want to reference him being a cyborg in Mortal Kombat Legacy, perhaps Hydro could take the spot of Cyber Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat 2011. With Cyber Sub-Zero's moves never being brought back in favor of just having one Sub-Zero, couldn't you see them being implemented with a new cyborg named Hydro? There's a lot of directions you could go. Personally, I like the high-pressure water being used in a way that Rain isn't, but if they want to make Hydro a vessel for a new cyborg, I wouldn't mind that either. Regardless, if Mortal Kombat ever decides to expand their array of multicolor ninjas in human or cyborg form, Hydro should be their man, just like how he was my man for the top pick on this list.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality!
Now, what did you think? Were all these characters picks that would shake up the roster, or would some of them have just caused chaos that even Havoc would hate? What other obscure Mortal Kombat characters from the lore would you like to see, whether I discussed them or not? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.